Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into MHT Kang's Christ Protagonist or Logos Dethroned. And let me tell you, this is a seriously provocative book that goes right for the jugular, challenging the very foundations of Western history and thought. So the author kicks things off with this incredibly powerful parable. And the point isn't about telling lies. It's about something way more sneaky. The idea is that you can take a fundamental truth and completely twist its meaning. Not by adding anything false, but just by reorganizing it, by reframing it. And that one idea, that sets the stage for everything else in this book. And this right here is the central explosive question the book forces you to ask. What if everything we think of as our history, our philosophy, even our modern secular values, what if it's all built on a deliberate reshuffling of the deck that happened 2,000 years ago? Okay, so to get our heads around this, we're going to break the author's argument down into 5 key pieces. We'll start with a core contradiction, then look at a battle between Paul and the Gnostics, the dethronement of a huge philosophical concept, a radical rewrite of history, and finally, how this all supposedly connects to the world we live in right now.
So let's jump right in with the book's foundational claim. The entire case is built on something the author calls the antagonism thesis.
So what is the antagonism thesis? Well, here's the bombshell. The book claims that what we call Christianity isn't a straight line from the Gospels. Instead, it argues it's mainly a Pauline creation, a whole new system of belief built by Paul of Tarsus that was actually designed to be a rival to the original teachings. And the author paints a picture of 2 completely different messages. On one side, you have this idea of immanence, that God is in the world, salvation is an inside job, and the Savior is within you. But on the other side, you have Paul's message of transcendence. Suddenly, God is separate from the world, salvation comes from faith in an external event, and you get this massive split between the flesh and the spirit. So, this sets the stage for what the author portrays as a full-on war of ideas in the early days of the church. This wasn't just a friendly debate, it was a battle for the very soul of what Christianity was going to become. The author presents the Gnostics as the champions of that first internal message. For them, Christ wasn't just some guy who lived and died. Christ was a divine spark, an inner principle inside every single person. And the solution to suffering wasn't about waiting for redemption from the outside. It was about finding knowledge, gnosis, on the inside, to free yourself from what they saw as a cosmic prison. And to back up this idea of a huge conflict, the book points to texts like the Clementine Homilies. This quote, which is presented as the Apostle Peter talking to a rival, is used as evidence that this was a bitter, personal fight. We're talking about the original followers versus this newcomer, Paul, whose teachings they saw as a hostile takeover. So who won this battle? Well, according to the text, Paul's version did. Its universal message, its clear rules, its promise of salvation through faith alone, it was just a much more effective system for organizing and spreading. The book argues it didn't just win the debate, it swallowed its competition whole, effectively erasing them from mainstream history. Okay, so this is where we get to the philosophical heart of the argument. Because the author claims this wasn't just a religious fight, it was an earthquake that completely reshaped Western thought. And it all centered on the dethronement of one key idea from the ancient world. And that big idea is logos. You see, for the ancient Greeks, logos was the divine intelligence, the rational code that gave order to the entire universe. It wasn't some god up in the clouds. It was the truth and order you could see and understand right here, woven into the very fabric of nature. And the book lays out this incredible philosophical domino effect. Step 1, the Greeks see logos in the world. Step 2, Paul knocks that domino over by taking God out of the world, making him transcendent. Step 3, centuries later, thinkers like Augustine internalize the whole drama, making it a struggle between sin and reason inside man. And step 4, philosophers like Kant and Hegel take that idea and secularize it into a world spirit or an engine of progress, pushing all of history towards some final destination. So the big takeaway here is that this one theological shift completely changed our concept of time. We went from the cyclical view of the ancient world to a linear story, a fallen past, a struggling present, and a redeemed future. And this belief in progress, this idea of marching towards a final goal, the author argues that became the unquestioned operating system of the entire Western world. All right, hold on tight because this is where the book makes its most controversial claims. The author argues that to install this new worldview, you couldn't just change philosophy. You had to rewrite history itself. You had to literally construct the timeline we all take for granted. To make this case, the author points to these so-called astrotheological parallels. The argument goes that key parts of the Christ story, the virgin birth, the 12 disciples, the resurrection, aren't unique historical events. They're actually mythical patterns that reflect ancient solar worship, patterns you can find in much older stories about figures like Horus in Egypt or Mithra in Persia. And to bolster this idea of a fabricated past, the book brings in the new chronology theory. Now, it is really important to state that mainstream historians consider this to be fringe pseudoscience, but the theory as presented in the book claims that over 1,000 phantom years were inserted into our timeline, meaning key events we think are centuries apart might have actually happened around the same time. It's a radical rewriting of history. So why bring up all these fringe theories? Well, the author's point is to present them as evidence of a conscious plan. The argument is that if you create a story that fits a mythical template and then you construct a historical timeline to make it seem real, you can cement your new worldview as undeniable historical fact. And that brings us to the final part of the argument, where the book connects all these ancient threads to the here and now. The author claims this old theological framework never really went away. It just changed its clothes. And we're living in the world that Paul's ideas created. This chart really lays out the direct lines the author is trying to draw. The Pauline concept of man's sinfulness is seen as an echo in the modern idea of humanity as a flawed stage to be overcome. The promise of a future kingdom becomes the secular belief in an end of history. The need for spiritual self-transcendence is reborn in transhumanism's technological quest to defeat our biology. And the universal mission to all people, well, that's linked to the drive for globalism. The book uses quotes like this one from Bertrand Russell to argue that this relentless push for a perfected, globally organized future is just the logical conclusion of Paul's original promise. It's the same project, but stripped of its religious language and recast in the language of science and politics. And this is the final punch. The author's ultimate argument is that our modern, secular, scientific world isn't the opposite of religion. No, it's actually the final, most successful version of one particular religion, a 2,000-year-old Pauline theology that's now just hiding in plain sight under the name progress. And so the book leaves us all with one final, deeply unsettling question. Is the path our civilization is on just an organic evolution of ideas? Or are we unknowingly following a blueprint, executing a theological program that was laid down centuries ago, a program we don't even recognize anymore?